So here we go.
Huge hype for this game.
I think there was too much hype for this game, unfortunately. We'll get into it, but we'll get into it. There's too
Chris,
too much hype.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with where will you start? We can just go from there.
See, that's all I have down here is my nitpicks. So I don't know. We can touch on. I don't know. Do you guys want to do our typical graphics, sound, and gameplay?
We can just start with graphics. Graphics-wise, I thought it had a similar look to Resident Evil 4, which is a good thing. But even like I thought the overall were really good. And even just the overall art style, I thought they hit the mark.
Yeah, it looked like it looked like the way that I think Mikami intended it for it to look. Yeah. He wanted this to be like a natural successor to Resident Evil 4. So like you said, I think atmosphere looks great, backgrounds look good, characters are nicely detailed, enemies look good, creature effects are awesome. I think that they hit the mark. It's very atmospheric, it's gloomy. I don't know if it looks next gen. I mean, it definitely I played it on PS3. So I'm not exactly sure how it looked on PS4, but
I'm sure it definitely obviously looks a little bit better on the PS4.
Yeah.
But overall, I thought they still did a good job with it.
I'm glad that they decided to letterbox the game. So I mean, it's in like a widescreen format. So I mean, I'm glad that they kind of did away with most of like the heads-up display. So I mean, on the screen, it's like it pretty much immerses you into the gameplay.
Yeah.
Graphics, everything looks pretty good in this one.
I was gonna bring that up too. Yeah, the letterboxing is a cool effect. There are a handful of other games that I know that have done that, but not too many of them do. If you're on the PC, you can actually there's some hacks and you can use the dev console to remove that, but it screws up your FOV. So like if you remove the letterboxing, it like zooms way in, and then you can't see shit anyway. So there's no point.
I think that adds to the overall aesthetic of the game, though. I think it's supposed to look like a horror film. So I mean, I think that's kind of what you get, you know?
Yeah. No, you're right. It was cool. The only other thing is, I think it's not the most detailed game out there. So I don't know. I did notice on PC there was some pop in and some other stuff.
Oh yeah, they're definitely.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
That happens a lot, and there were definitely texture pop ins a lot every time like I'm loading a game and stuff, but. It didn't totally bring me out of the experience, and as long as it doesn't do that, then, a few texture pop-ins here and there doesn't really ruin it for me.
That actually happened to me quite a bit. Like when I was if I was hiding in a corner and there were enemies coming after me and I was trying to like look around or whatever, that's when I would start getting like texture pop-ins, and like the camera was pretty hard to use too. So I mean, like, that's when I got the predominant amount of texture pop-ins was during that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, still, it delivers for what it is, you know.
Yeah.
All right, let's touch on sound real quick so we can get to the gameplay here. So with the sound, I'll start with the first of a few comparisons to Alien. So as far as the sound goes, I mean, the enemies sound appropriate, but nothing really stand out. The music was there. See, that's the problem here. So timing is everything. If you're going to release your game, you should at least be aware of the competition. If you're going to release a similar type of game in the same genre, then,
right.
I guess make sure your game is better. Because inevitably there's a comparison with Alien now, because we just got done playing that. Yeah. And just because the sound design and overall sound in Alien was so good, it makes this one seem like...
weak?
Well, maybe not weak, but this was competent. But compared to Alien, it was kind of like, they made the right decisions here, but they didn't do anything special. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think with Alien though, I think with that game was all about like the atmosphere, because you weren't seeing the alien like all the time. A lot of the scare attacks in that game was you didn't know where he was coming from, so they had to use sound a lot.
Right.
This game is different, so. But I think that the music in this really, like you said, served its purpose.
It served its purpose, but I do agree with Chris that it could have been used a little bit more effectively. But I don't know, like Nick, you're right as well. It's a different type of game. I mean, this was very much like Resident Evil 4, so there was a lot more emphasis. There was obviously a lot more emphasis on action. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the sound design was good. It just wasn't. If you compare it to how great the sound design was, you can see where it was kind of lacking.
Right.
So, still, sound design was good.
All right, let's get to the gameplay then. So how about things we liked? I like the weapons.
Yeah, I mean, I saw in your notes that you didn't really like the controls that much. I feel like the controls take a little bit to
the controls are pretty bad. They're not.
I got a whole rant. Let's touch on it. So stuff we liked first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so you like the controls? Is that what you were gonna say?
I didn't hate them. I thought they took a little bit of getting used to, but I don't know.
But whenever somebody says, like, I look at it this way: whenever somebody says, "Yeah, the controls, I just had to get used to them" or whatever, that's another way of saying that, like, there's the accessibility of this game is there's a learning curve, and for a game like this, it should be familiar. Like, this is like supposed to be. It's the guy who did Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, 4. He did Shadows of the Damned. It's supposed to be like you pick it up and you're just able to, like, kind of know what's going on. There should not be a learning curve from this director for this type of game. It should just be pick up and play.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Well, I guess we can go over that now then, since we're already. So yeah, it just felt like the controls were clunky. I don't know. And then like some of those button prompts, like see right there, he's picking up items and shit. Like that was like just getting Sebastian to control the way I wanted. It was just a lot of times it was a pain in the ass, especially during something like this where you've got an enemy coming after you, or if you're fighting a boss and you need to grab that ammo quick and reload your shit so you can fight back. Yeah. Like
it's a pain in the ass sometimes.
Weren't coming up, and it was just a friggin' chore and a pain in the ass to get it to work.
Yeah, like that's how I remember. There was one part where I had to like put these bodies. I had to use this lever to put the bodies on like a tomb. And like a lot of times that would happen as well. Like the prompts wouldn't.
Yeah, you had to be exactly in the right spot to get the prompt to show up, and then actually do the thing and wait for the animation to run.
Yeah.
For a game that was in development as long as this one was, and like as hyped as it was, and it was even delayed, you know, like these controls should have been. If anything, the control should have been a no-brainer.
Yeah. So why was it like that?
I agree with that even now. Like I feel like games now like. I don't know. Like, don't overcomplicate it, I guess.
Don't overcomplicate it. How about have the prompt work when I'm standing within a foot of it, and not, I got to be on top of it in exactly the right direction at exactly the right angle.
Yeah.
That sucks. That's not.
The controls weren't awful, but they could have been tightened up considerably before this game's release.
This is like a small thing, but like I think L2 is to like run, and then like L1 is to like aim, and like there's so many times in like close situations like this where I'd want to like shoot at it,
right?
But like I would just get so screwed up.
This dude should have died.
I would die
5 times
so many times like during stuff like this. I don't know, like just like stuff where I could have if the controls were a little bit better. Like I feel like I could have had an easier time with it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything else we liked? I got a whole list of shit I didn't like.
Okay, so things I liked about the game. All right, so gameplay itself. I mean, combat was fine. I mean, it was standard survival horror type combat. That was good. I liked it. I wanted this game to feel familiar, so it felt familiar enough. Like we already went over how clunky the controls are. However, the controls still felt familiar enough that I felt like I was playing a Shinji Mikami game. I felt like I was playing something that was like the natural evolution of Resident Evil 4 and not the piece of garbage that 5 and 6 were. So gameplay-wise, I'm glad that it was familiar enough to remind me of how great Resident Evil 4 was. That being said, it's been said on the internet, this was like a Shinji Mikami greatest hits. So it didn't feel like anything new, but I did like how familiar everything was. I'll say that. Before I say anything negative, I liked the familiarity of the game. So I liked that.
Yeah.
Just to add one more thing on here. So you guys, in our pre-production meeting for this, I started an argument about how, because I'll be honest, I didn't like the game for probably the first 2/3, and then I changed my opinion. But one of the things I thought was actually kind of boring was the plot. I don't know. The plot didn't really have a lot going on, but the
plot's a little weak, and I thought that the acting was very wooden, and not in the good like Resident Evil 1 like really really bad.
Like it's not.
It was just bad. Like the acting was just wooden. It was like no emotion.
Yeah, like maybe 1 and even 2. Like there's some campiness to it. Yeah, like
Not good
Even if
campiness,
it had something
though.
like that where it's a bit cheesy, that would have been like more entertaining. I can kind of see that.
Yeah, for the first section of the game, what I was trying to say is that it did turn around. At the end, they give you just enough to say, okay, like you can figure out the stuff that definitely happened, and then they leave room to speculate a little bit more. And I like that. I think that the story did turn itself around, at least for me, at the end of the game. So I was all set to say, yeah, there's no redeemable qualities here at all. Just whatever. But I did change my mind at the end. So why don't we don't we move on to my thing here? So we did talk about the controls, but I don't know if you guys noticed this. I had a couple instances where like the weapons just wouldn't work, especially that freaking crossbow. Like I would shoot dudes and it would go through them, or like I don't know. I was seeing some weird shit. Not a lot, but several times I was like, what the shit? I had that one bolt. I needed to hit that guy with that shit, and it didn't do it. Now I'm screwed.
That's happened. Like you know the bolts that like they'll explode. Like the exploding ones. I would shoot it in like it's almost like I was shooting a dud. Like that was like not effective whatsoever. So like there were instances where that would happen, but there are also instances where it wasn't just the weapons that weren't working. It was also the game would crash. The game crashed twice on me.
That's another one on my list. I had crashes. I had crashes.
So that definitely.
Yeah, I didn't experience any crashes, but I could. Yeah, I have heard about that in the game. So
I crashed out at least half a dozen times. Usually when like fighting a boss, or sometimes just for no reason.
Yeah, like during like. At the end of the chapter, when it was loading into like the next chapter,
just blow up.
It was just like go black, and you could hear like the sound, but nothing was happening.
Right.
Stuff like that would happen.
How do you guys? This is a separate question. How do you guys feel about the cheapness of some of the bosses and even some of the minor characters? I found myself just dying over and over, and like just getting so pissed off at the game because of like. I felt like there were a lot of cheap deaths in this game. Like
I'm glad you asked that. That's another item on my list. Dude, the friggin' first time you fight the chainsaw guy, the friggin'...
so brutal. Yeah, it takes forever. Forever. It sucks.
The friggin' keeper, the dude with the safe on his head.
Yeah. So cheap.
And that guy shows up a bunch, like...
The game is the game's not hard in a hard way. The game's hard in a cheap way, which isn't fair.
No, I can't remember. Yeah, that chainsaw dude the first time. I don't even remember what I did to beat him. I must have used a combination of friggin' agony bolts and.
Yeah, I had
that was a
trouble
pain in
with
the ass. That guy.
Like I don't know, like the angles sometimes, the camera angles I feel like would be almost distracting.
The camera is not very good in this game. It is not a great camera setup. I know that they were going for that classic survival horror over the shoulder perspective, but it does not work very well. For a game that has a pretty heavy emphasis on stealth, it does not work very well in this game. I found myself dying quite a bit because I couldn't see what was around the next corner.
Was that you just couldn't maneuver it, or it wouldn't move fast enough for you?
Just couldn't see anything. Like I would end up getting like some pop in, or like it just the camera was just not there. I felt like the camera needed work. Like the camera angles themselves. They needed work. I felt like it wasn't as responsive as it should have been.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the letterboxing because you are losing a little bit of the screen. So already, and that's a good point. If they don't have the camera working correctly and they cut off that huge chunk, then you're already at a disadvantage. So that's not good.
Yeah,
I felt like that kind of lended to the cheapness. It's like I'm like, okay, I can't really see what's going on. Oh, there's a guy who died.
Yeah, that actually makes sense.
And then it's like, okay, well. I guess I have to start this whole part over again. And then it's like, I try it again, same thing happens. Then eventually I figure it out, and then it's like, okay, on to the next part, and hopefully I don't die for a while. But I felt like going into every major part of the game, I experienced quite a few cheap deaths before I figured out a way to kind of like just breeze by whatever it was I faced. And I know a lot of people will probably say, well, you just have to learn the patterns of the enemies or whatever. Yeah, but I mean, I wanted to experience this game for story and like overall gameplay, and I felt like the cheapness just kind of took away from that.
Yeah. All right. Before we get to our score, I was going to mention, it turned around for me at the end. I felt like I said, I started that argument with the rest of you guys, and you guys you're nuts, like whatever.
I do think it's scary.
I did change my mind. I want to mention there's a Julie Kidman DLC coming out, which is pretty much, from what it sounds like, it's going to be the friggin' Ada Resident Evil mission. So it's probably stuff that was going on when you get separated from her in the main game. Possibly. Right. That's my guess. Might be something else. And this game is pretty much Resident Evil combined with The Matrix is what I was going to say. So
I saw that in your notes.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of... It was refreshing to see Shinji Mikami make a game that could have been a Resident Evil-ish type game, but it felt like he didn't invest the same sort of, care into the development of the characters as he did with Resident Evil. I know with Resident Evil, all those characters are, so beloved at this point, like Jill, Chris... Hunk, Leon, Claire, and Barry. I don't know. I just don't feel. Attached. I don't feel this. I don't feel the same about these characters. They're good, but they're not. They're a little more throwaway.
Well, because they were less developed.
Yeah, I feel like, and I was saying this to you before. When you play Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil, you get their backstory a little bit.
I wanted that, a total.
And you don't really get this. You don't really get in this game. I feel like you do when you collect the badges when you go into that. When you go into that area where about to go into the mirror. At least they
have that. So you
they
can
have
learn more
that.
About
you read
Sebastian.
them, and his backstory is interesting, and it deals with his wife and his kid. It is interesting, but I wish they kind of put that in a cinematic like that, before the game actually starts. But they didn't do that, so that's one flaw I wish that they did add.
I disagree with you a little bit. I actually like how they started the game, but I wish that they're maybe following the initial.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I guess more the end. It doesn't have to be right before, but I wish there was a break in the gameplay where you got to know this character a little bit. That's all.
All right, let's put up our score.
Yeah, I mean, I said a must play. There are some flaws with this game, but overall, I like the tone, graphics overall.
The two of you guys
the
with
gameplay,
the must play.
The gameplay, if you get a little bit used to it, it's fine. It's fine. Like I said, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it is. We just played Alien Isolation. I think it is maybe not as scary, but it's still there's some parts the story when you get at a certain point you get the kind of what's going on. And just the whole overall vibe is creepy, so it's definitely something I would definitely pick up.
I mean, I look at it like this. This is if you're a fan of horror, if you're a fan of Resident Evil, if you're a fan of Mikami, there's not much out there in terms of just new horror games that are worth playing. So even with everything that's wrong with this game, and granted a lot of this stuff is nitpicky, overall the game is great and it's a good game. It's just it rode the hype train way too much, and that it suffered for it. Yeah. But overall, it's a good game. This is what Resident Evil 5 should have been.
That's what I was saying. When I was playing this, it's I don't get
all right, yeah. There's gonna be. I don't agree with that 100%, but I can understand that comparison. I think most people are. A lot of people were disappointed with RE5 and RE6.
Games are more action now, and that's fine. But I felt Resident Evil 4 really hit that balance of survival horror and action, where now it's
right, and then Mikami left, and
I mean, complete action game.
Now it's action.
This is a good balance where it's survival horror and action, and it's good.
And I'm gonna put it out there. I don't hate Resident Evil 5. I think Resident Evil 5 is a solid game, but this is what I feel in terms of just overall quality and how I felt playing the game. This is the game that I wish Resident Evil 5 was.
Yeah.
I could replace Sebastian with Leon, and I would have been very satisfied with that. Or Chris. If Sebastian was Chris, and it was a Stars mystery, I would have been fine with that. But I mean, it's a solid game. I would definitely recommend picking it up, just because there's not a lot of great horror titles out there right now. So this one, it doesn't nail it, but it comes close.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's fair. and I alluded to it earlier, but I think after just having played Alien, I think that impacted my score a little bit.
Yeah.
So
sure.
You guys are saying must play. I'm saying rent or borrow. Unfortunately, I can't give it the must play because it's not. Again, same thing I said with Alien. It's not going to appeal to everybody. So, but still a really strong game. I had fun with it. It definitely, like I said, it turned things around at the end. I was all set to get. I'll be honest. I was all set to give this just a straight up pass, but. In the last third of the game, I was like, all right, the story kind of kicks into high gear, and it made sense after that. So there you go.